thanks to the worship team for doing a great job on all of the songs and the whole service this morning. You know, the tragedy of disaster have grabbed our headlines for years. Headlines that have included whole towns wiped out by a tornado, or hurricanes that have leveled cities, tsunamis that have wiped out countries, civil wars that have torn nations, and diseases that have ravaged the most diligent of societies. Tragedy and disaster have grabbed the headlines for a long, long time. But sometimes, the most trying difficulties that a person faces is not on the headlines of the newspaper, but what happens in your own home. A doctor writes diagnosis, cancer, on a lab report. A judge signs his name to a divorce document. A family business closes and locks its doors for the last time. A medium-sized company downsizes to become a small company. A single mother hesitates to open her mailbox, certain that the bills inside will outnumber the dollars in her bank account. A husband struggles with his attraction to a coworker. His mind is at war. A wife struggles with a husband who is cold and unfeeling, and her heart begins to harden. A troubled 15-year-old writes a letter to his parents saying he can't go on anymore. Some of the greatest tragedies and difficulties don't happen in the newspapers. They happen in your home. But there's an old Arab proverb that says, all sunshine and no rain makes a desert. If you never have any downtimes, dark times, or gloomy times in your life, then you'll be all dried up. There'll be no depth to your soul, and you'll have no maturity. It takes good times and bad times to mature a person. Life is a mixture of pain and pleasure, victory and defeat, success and failure, mountaintops and valleys. Today we close out the life of Jeremiah. Perhaps no other prophet went through the trials and difficulty in his life that Jeremiah did. And Jeremiah sums it up this way in Lamentations chapter 3. I'm the one who has seen the afflictions that come from the rod of the Lord's anger. He has led me into darkness, shutting out all light. He has turned his hand against me again and again all day long. In a world so apparently defined by tragedy, loss, and failure, we have to struggle, as Jeremiah struggled, wondering if faith, hope, and love ring true, possible, or realistic in our world today. I'm going to let you know there are 5 traits, 5 facts about going through the valleys of life that are true regardless of what valley you're in. And I would like to go through those with you briefly this morning. The first one is this: valleys are inevitable. Valleys are inevitable. They're going to happen, so you might as well count on them in life. You either just come out of a valley, you're either going into a valley, or you're in one right now. You know, you say, well, I'm on a mountaintop. Well, there's only one place to go when you're on top of a mountain. And I'm not trying to discourage you this morning. I'm trying to be realistic with you. I don't want you to have this attitude of life that nothing should go wrong for the Christian. That's just not true. Valleys happen. Jesus was very realistic about it in John chapter 16 when he said, in this world you will have trouble. Not might, not could, not should, not maybe. You will have trouble. So you're going to have difficulty, disappointment, and discouragement. There will be times of suffering, sorrow, and sickness. There will be times of frustration, failure, and fatigue. It's going to happen. They're a normal part of life. So don't be surprised when you enter a valley. Second thing you need to know about valleys is they're unpredictable. Valleys are unpredictable. You can't plan on them. You can't time them. And you can't schedule them. Valleys are always unexpected. Oh, you can count on them from time to time. There's an old saying that we used to talk about here about how after every successful event, that's when God is going to, or not God, but when Satan is going to intervene and make something bad happen. He wants to stop the momentum. He wants to stop something good from happening. So if something really successful takes place at church, be cautious. That's his opportunity to step in and hurt you. But generally speaking, valleys come at the worst times. When you don't have time. When you're unprepared. You know, a lot of times you get sick when you have that lapse in your health insurance. You know, that just seems to be when it happens. You know, has anybody ever had a flat tire at a good time? You know, maybe you weren't wanting to go to that wedding anyway. I don't know. But, maybe it was your own. I don't know, but I'm just saying. I'm kidding. But generally speaking, I've yet to meet somebody who said, I had the perfect flat tire. They just happen. And they're usually very inconvenient. And we're not talking just flat tires now, we're talking valleys in general. It'd be very great if you could schedule your valleys. You know, okay, this would be the great time for me to go through this bad situation. But we know you can't plan like that. Now, valleys can come suddenly and be very unpredictable. Have you ever noticed how easily a good day can turn into a bad day? You wake up, you're feeling good, the coffee tastes good, you're on time for work, and then you get that phone call. Or you get that text message. Or that routine doctor's checkup turns into a series of tests. Or there's that freak accident. Valleys just happen. And whether you've gone through them personally, your family and friends, your church members, they've gone through them too. Jeremiah 4:20 says, disaster follows disaster. In an instant, my tents are destroyed. My shelter falls in a moment. Valleys are unpredictable. We can plan and prepare as best as we can, but you just don't know when they're going to strike. The third thing about valleys is they are impartial. No one is immune to valleys. No one is insulated from pain and sorrow. No one gets to skate through life problem-free. Everybody has problems. Good people have problems, and bad people have problems. Problems, trials, difficulties, disturbances, downtimes, depression, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you're a person. It doesn't mean you're an evil person. It just means you are a person. The Bible's very clear that sometimes bad things happen to good people, and sometimes bad things happen to bad people. And sometimes good things happen to bad people, and good things happen to bad people. Valleys are impartial. They don't care how good you are or what you've done. They're going to happen. Jesus put it this way in Matthew chapter 5. For he gives sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. So God allows the sun to shine on everybody, and he allows the rain to fall on everybody. Valleys are impartial. There's no status. There's no discriminatory lines. Valleys are impartial. Fourth thing about valleys, and this is an important one right here. You're not going to want to miss this one. Valleys are temporary. Valleys are temporary. They have an end. They don't last. Some are deeper than others, and some take a long time to last. Valleys are temporary. David said, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. David did not say, even though I camp in the valley of the shadow of death forever. No, he says, I walk through the valley because I'm passing through that valley. Whatever valley you're experiencing is not, you're not to stay there your entire life. Now, if you have a bad attitude and you make some bad choices, you can camp out there a lot longer than God ever intended it to be. But as a whole, the valley is not something you're supposed to stay in. It's something you go through. It's a circumstance that is inflicted upon you. It's a situation that has a season to it. You know, I mean, think about it in our weather pattern that we just went through. We're having 70-degree days, trees are blooming, and you wake up to snow yesterday morning. Now, that just doesn't make sense. That just doesn't add up. And that's kind of how it goes in life. We know this snow's not going to last. It's already mostly melted anyway. And in a couple of weeks, these gardens are going to be planted and things are going to be blooming and life is going to be great. And we know that winter will eventually come to an end. Valleys in your life will come to an end as well. They come to pass. 1 Peter 1:6 says, so be truly glad. There's wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. So Peter admits that sometimes you're going to go through a series of tough times in your life. It's going to be rough. Life is tough. You're just going to have to deal with it. But it's only for a while. It says there's wonderful joy ahead. Now, he's talking about heaven at this point. Yes, there can be wonderful joy in this life, but he is looking beyond to heaven where there will be no problems, to where there will be no valleys, to there will be no more difficulties. While we'll be harassed in heaven, we'll have no problem, or harassed on earth, we'll have no problems in heaven. And so that's the good news that Peter is pointing out here. Wonderful joy ahead, though you must endure trials for a little while. Robert Schuller once said, "Problems are not stop signs, they are guidelines." Problems are not stop signs, they are guidelines. Your valleys in life should carve a path through the mountain and up the mountain to a closer relationship with God. Which really leads us to the fifth point this morning, and that is valleys are purposeful. Valleys are purposeful. God has a reason for allowing you or for leading you through each and every valley of your life. Whether it's the valley of doubt, depression, despair, discouragement, defeat, He's got a reason behind what you're going through. Now, He doesn't cause you to go into every valley. Let's be honest. Sometimes we make dumb choices that put us into valleys. But sometimes He may lead us directly into a valley for a purpose. It's in the valleys that our faith is built up and that our faith becomes strong. You know, we love the mountaintops. We love the good times. I mean, for example, I'll just tell you, today, if you didn't know, it's my wedding anniversary. We've been married for 12 years today, so we're excited about that. And I know that's probably not a fourth of as long as many of you all have been married, and so you're giving us a high aspiration to reach towards. But as we started talking about it last night, we actually started talking about, okay, what were we doing at this time 12 years ago? Well, I wasn't sleeping yet, and in the morning I got McDonald's, and then we were going on down the list, and we're having a good time talking about it. But, we were talking about mostly everything that went well, and everything that went fine. She did remind me that I forgot my wedding ring for the wedding, but other than that, we just talked about how well everything went. And as we reflect throughout the day today, I'm sure we'll just talk about, can you remember doing this? Oh, my goodness. And generally speaking, we want to remember the good times. Yeah, we might bring up a bad time every now and then, but for the most part, we want to remember those mountaintops, those good experiences. And we literally had a mountaintop experience on our honeymoon because we went on this mini golf course that had a mountain, and you have to climb up the mountain to putt. And so we did. So we had a mountaintop experience. So it's just one of those things where, generally speaking, we like to remember the good times. And who doesn't? I mean, we all like to remember good times. Who wants to be Eeyore at every function, nobody knows how to do that. So when everything's going fine, though, and everything's going great, and we spend all our time on the mountaintops, who needs God? Where is the need for God? Now, as a Christian, you recognize you always need God, and you give thanks to Him for the mountaintops. But when do you feel you really need God? It's not when things are going so well. It's when you're in the valleys. We need valleys. We need to come to face with some dark valleys from time to time, because that will drive us to our knees. Faith is strengthened in the valleys. When you don't feel like serving and trusting God and praising God, that's when your faith is built up. It's not in the good times. It's in the valleys. Every problem has a purpose. Even the tiny problems. They seem like minor irritations. It's that little fly buzzing you that won't go away. But they have a purpose. God is a teacher of character. He wants to change you and mature you. And yes, He can change you and mature you through learning how to handle good things. But many times, listen to what Jeremiah says in Lamentations chapter 3. I cry out, my splendor is gone. Everything I had hoped for from the Lord is lost. The thought of my suffering and homelessness is bitter beyond words. I will never forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. Now, it sure sounds like Jeremiah is going a very difficult valley anyways. But where is his hope? If this is where Lamentations chapter 3 ended, it's the last writing of Jeremiah we have, that would be pretty sad, and maybe even to a borderline pathetic. But here's where he gets to. Yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is His faithfulness. His mercy begin afresh each morning. I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance, therefore I will hope in Him. The Lord is good to those who depend on Him, to those who search for Him. So it's interesting, and the question I have is, how can someone who so eloquently penned the words of pain and frustration come back with words full of confidence and assurance? The difference between unrecoverable despair and unintimidated confidence lies in one word, and it's the word hope. It's the word hope. Now, before we talk about what hope is and how it works, let's first begin with what hope is not. Hope hope is not optimism. Hope is not optimism. Now, don't get me wrong, I love optimists, and I tend to be an optimist myself. Optimists tend to live longer than pessimists. They accomplish more, and they're more fun to be around. As I said, nobody wants to go invite Eeyore to the party on purpose. But, a pessimist can hardly wait for the future because they can't wait to look back with regret and complaint. But optimists can hardly wait for the future because they know it's going to be better than today. It's like the student who was seen pedaling his bicycle on a college campus. He was wearing a t-shirt that said, "Studying to be a doctor." And on the back of his bike, he had a little bumper sticker that said, "Studying to be a Mercedes." It's the difference between optimist and pessimist. It's like the pessimist who says, "Ooh, there's ants on my pizza." The optimist says, "Woohoo, free toppings." None of you are optimistic, apparently, I'm telling you. Oh, man. But optimists handle failure and frustration better than pessimists. For all their similarities, though, hope and optimism are entirely different animals. Optimists think they can, or that others will. They place the confidence, in a sense, in themselves or in their circumstances. But those with hope, they know that God will. And that's the difference. Hope knows that God will handle, that God will take care of, that God will do. Versus optimists that expect, or put the faith in themselves. Optimists survey the circumstances and they find the positive. They see the glass half full. They see a flat tire and say, well, at least it's only flat on the bottom. That's how optimists work. But it's not enough to be optimistic. We have to have a hope beyond. I do have to tell you one story, though, about the family that had two twin boys. And they looked identical. Everything about them was the same on their appearance. But their personalities couldn't be more different from one another. If one of the twins was hot, the other one was cold. If one said the TV was too loud, the other said it was too quiet and needed to be turned up. They're just opposite in every way. Extreme optimist, extreme pessimist, doom and gloom, happy all the time. Just very different kids. So the dad thought he would try a little experiment. Their birthday came along, and he decided that in the pessimist room, he would put every toy he could find, buy it all, put it in his room, and in the optimist room, he would put a pile of horse manure. And so that's what he did. And so he went by the pessimistic boy's room that night, and he's sitting there crying among all his presents and new gifts. And his dad said, why are you crying? He said, because my friends are going to be jealous that I have more than they have, and I'm going to have to read all these instruction manuals, and I'm going to need new batteries every week, and these toys are going to break. It's just terrible. And the father said, this is unbelievable. And he went by the optimist room, and the kid is dancing in the pile of manure. And the dad scratched his head. He says, why are you so happy? He said, with this much manure, there's got to be a pony somewhere. And he's hoping for that pony. And that's what hope is, Hope doesn't take its cue from circumstances. It's beyond that. And there's this odd math equation. It doesn't make sense in the world of geometry necessarily, but the greater the pain, the more desperate the circumstance, the stronger hope becomes. Paul talks about it in Romans 5. Not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, when it's dark enough, you can see the stars. So what is the reason for hope? What is the reason that hope does not disappoint? Well, Paul says it in 2 words. Hope does not disappoint because God. Hope does not disappoint because God. Which is exactly why Jeremiah was able to find hope in dismal circumstances. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. What did he call to mind? Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. Jeremiah's confidence in the future had nothing to do with being an optimist. If you were to rank the characters in the Bible from most optimistic to most pessimistic, Jeremiah would be dead last. He was the most pessimistic. He had the nickname, the weeping prophet. You know how that translates in today's language? Crybaby. He cried all the time. The lights dimmed when Jeremiah walked into a room. He was the cloud on a sunny day. But when he talks about the future, he sounds like he's selling something on commission. He gets all kinds of excited because his hope wasn't in his circumstances. It was because God. His hope was in God. When your hope is in God, then it's much greater than any circumstance or any valley that you experience. Here's what you need to know about hope. Hope is based on God's faithfulness in the past. Hope is based on God's faithfulness in the past. When your hope is in God, you begin expressing confidence for the future because of what God has already done in the past. Which is why memory is so important to hope. By reaching into the past, we can find assurances that the future will not be destroyed by the present. That's how the Jewish people did it. No people have ever gone through so much for so long at the hands of the world as these people, yet they're so very hopeful. And they're hopeful because of what God has done in the past. I think this is most clearly seen in Psalm 136. In this textbook example, it literally explains how the future hope is maintained in present trials. Now, this psalm is what we call a responsive reading. We haven't done one of these in a long time, so I'm going to hopefully get you to participate with me here, and if you don't, we'll just do it over and over again until you do. So, keyword, participate. Okay, and so here's what would happen, is whoever was reading the psalm would read a line, and then the people would read this, let's go to the next slide here, this phrase, His faithful love endures forever. So every line I say, you're going to say, His faithful love endures forever. Now, I'm not reading every line of the psalm. It's, some 30 verses long or so. We're going to read just a selection of the verses. And after every verse, I'll give you a little point, and you say what's on that slide, okay? Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good.
His faithful love endures forever.
Give thanks to Him who made the heavens so skillfully.
His faithful love endures forever.
He brought Israel out of Egypt.
His faithful love endures forever.
Give thanks to Him who parted the Red Sea.
His faithful love endures forever.
He led Israel safely through.
His faithful love endures forever.
But He hurled Pharaoh and his army into the Red Sea.
His faithful love endures forever.
Give thanks to Him who led His people through the wilderness.
His faithful love endures forever.
He killed powerful kings.
His faithful love endures forever.
God gave the land of these kings as an inheritance.
His faithful love endures forever.
Okay, we've got three more. He remembered us in our weakness.
His faithful love endures forever.
All right, we're going to crank it up now. He saved us from our enemies.
His faithful love endures forever.
Give thanks to the God of heaven.
His faithful love endures forever.
Now, did you notice, as we went through all these examples, that they're saying His faithful love endures forever, not because of what He's going to do, though there is hope for what God's going to do. It's all about what God has already accomplished. It goes all the way back to creation. He skillfully made the heavens. He brought Israel out of Egypt, parted the Red Sea, destroyed the enemies, gave them the promised land, saved them from their current enemies. And so they have all these promises fulfilled in the past. And it is with the present tense command, give thanks to God. That's how Israel kindled hope. That's how they overcame despair. They remembered what God had done in the past. They were honest about the tragedy of the present, but they were hopeful about the future because God was faithful in the past. Our hope grows out of our memories. That's why it's important to take time to jot down anytime something good happens that God does in your life. So when times are difficult, you go through a valley, you can look back and say, look what God has done. If you didn't know it, our prayer room is virtually complete at this point, and if you ever want to go in it to pray, you're more than welcome to. But a couple more things we're going to add to it is a prayer request list that people can fill out, request tags, and ask for prayers of something, and whoever goes in there can see that and pray for it if you would like. But we're also going to include a prayer answered board. And what we're going to ask people to do there is whenever God answers a prayer, that they would write out what it is, or just say, He answered my prayer, or something generic, something specific, whatever you're comfortable writing. And the reason is, we want people, when they go in to pray, to see what God has done. We want them to be full of confidence that God will respond. No, God does not always respond the way we ask or want Him to, but God always responds. And so that's the whole purpose. We want people to look back and see how God has been faithful then, and we can base our future on God's faithfulness in the past. I'm looking forward to reading those tags. I can't wait to see what you write and to have my prayer life bolstered and my confidence just raised up to a new level as we see just how faithful God has been. If you want real hope in your life, you look and see what God has done in the past, and then that'll give you hope for the future. Wise worship team joins me on stage. I want to share just a little bit of history with you before we wrap up. In the caves of the catacombs of ancient Rome, archaeologists have discovered a number of early Christian symbols. One of them is the Christian fish that we've all come to know. One is a shepherd. Those are very common, but there's a third symbol that appears just as often as any other, and that's the anchor. As you see on the screen, there's also one on the back of our sanctuary that every Sunday you walk out of here, you see it. Now, the catacombs were very interesting. It was this honeycomb of caves where the Christians hid from Roman persecution and where they buried their dead. And it seems very odd that they would use a symbol as firm and secure and hope-filled as an anchor in a place of death and hiding. But not when you remember that their hope in the face of persecution and death was not in getting out of the catacombs and living a worry-free life in this world. Their hope was looking back at the empty tomb of their Savior. And that one day, whatever tomb they would embody, they would too be free of that. They were hopeful in the risen Savior and the coming King, and that's where ours can rest as well. Now, the Christian anchor is elaborated on in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19, where it says, "We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure." Now, they have found tombs that date all the way back to 100 A.D., and near the end of the 1st century, going into the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and they've displayed anchors as a very common symbol. You go to cemeteries today, there's often crosses or flowers or something like that, but the anchor was so common. In one cemetery alone, they found 70 anchors that were inscribed on the different monuments that were in it. So where did Christians get the idea? Was the book of Hebrews already written and they used it? Possibly, but there is a story in Christian history that dates to 100 A.D. The Emperor Trajan hated Christians, was very opposed to Christianity, and he banished St. Clement for converting people to follow Christ, and so he sent him to Crimea. Turns out St. Clement didn't care. He converted people in Crimea as well, and Trajan got so mad that he ordered that Clement be bound to an anchor and drowned in the sea, and that's how he died. His faithfulness to honor God, no matter the circumstances, in the face of death, inspired those in the 1st century, and the anchor became the common symbol of hope for the people. This morning, we look back to the past for a symbol of hope. And the symbol of hope is the cross. But more than that, the symbol of hope is the empty tomb. Our hope is in the risen Savior. And one day he's going to return for us and take us home to be with him. Now, whether that's today, whether it's next week, whether it's many years from now, I don't know. But our hope is not in what may be in the future. It's what God's already done in the past. This morning, if you need to receive the real hope of this life, it's not in an insurance policy. Your real hope is in the risen Savior. This morning, let's look at God's faithfulness and respond accordingly. Make a decision this morning as we stand and as we sing.